Chris Ballard's annual media soiree today. We got 6 days until the first round of the NFL draft. We'll see what the Colts do. Ballard obviously plays his cards pretty close to his vest, but I think he told us some things in this media availability, as he always does pre-draft. He will tell us kind of where the shelf is in the first round. He does that today. He tells us that Ogletree is back. He's not on the exempt list anymore. He's back with the Colts. That's good news for tight end depth, certainly. Ogletree, a guy who's going to be counted on if Jelani Woods is not healthy. Ogletree is a really important piece of the puzzle for the Colts at tight end. As far as the depth of this draft and positional depth, really interesting stuff from Chris Ballard. I thought he revealed some things, and he kind of jokes around a little bit. I wouldn't take too seriously the trading back thing. I'm not going to hold him to that, or restructuring DeForest Buckner's contract just to make Twitter explode. I don't think he was serious in talking about that, but we got some good information, I think, out of Chris Ballard today.
No, I mean, look, you always want a guy that can catch a hitch and go, or catch it shallow and, be able to make somebody miss. And then I think also, like a lot of the yards after catch, not only, from a make a miss run, but also from scramble plays. I mean, that's where a lot of them come from. Guys, all of a sudden the quarterback starts to move around. Guys break free and they're in space. Now it's harder to cover. All you got to cover, when you got guys that can run, it allows them to free up. I thought you even saw it some with Gardner this year. Times when he would start running around, we'd hit a shy, after the catch, just because of his ability to run around. But you're always looking for guys that are dangerous with the ball in their hands.
Chris, how do you view, when you look at players, offense or defense, playing being an elite maybe at one thing or being good at multiple different things? Like, how much do you weigh that throughout the draft? Like, elite talent in one area versus, okay, they can do multiple different things at a high level.
No, that's a good question, because look, there's no perfect player. They all got a hole, every one of them. Somewhere there's no perfect, ready-made player. They all have strengths and they all have weaknesses. So what you want to do is, okay, this is what he does really well. Let's put him in that role to do that specific thing really well. And I think in the draft, that's one thing you're looking at. And that's one thing we're meeting with our coaches today and tomorrow, and we just had a long discussion about a couple guys. I'm not going to tell you what's out of the ball, but what's the vision for the player? Like, it's easy for scouts and us to have a vision, but the coaches got to have the same vision, and we've got to be able to see the thing of how we're going to end up developing and what role this guy's going to play. And then if he does have some deficiencies, okay, what are the things he does really well, and how are we going to use him to allow him to do those things really well?
What's the, very open-ended question, but what's the biggest pitfall, do you think, whether individually or as teams, that you got to avoid in the draft?
That's a good question. It's a deep one. we can probably spend some time on that one.
Later, I don't know.
Character is always, who they are is important, okay? Mm-hmm. And look, we're dealing with young men here that are young men that are not fully developed into men yet. We're talking about 20, 21, 22-year-old young men that make mistakes, okay? And I can live with some of those mistakes. But to me, the things that when they fail is if they don't love to play the game. I think we've all, and y'all have done this long enough, you've been around players that maybe are not fully mature off the field, but on the field, they love football, so they're going to do everything in their power to get better. So I think and it's the hardest part to figure out. Like, character is the hardest. Time and money. How are they going to handle their time, because they've got more of it, and how are they going to handle their money, and then the outside influences that are grabbing on them. I think sometimes we forget that these young men have a lot of people that all of a sudden you're playing in the NFL, you're playing professional sports, that are coming out of the woodworks to grab at them. So they got to be, and we're asking them to do it at a young age. Now I think we do a really good job. David Thornton is outstanding. David does a tremendous job connecting with not only the player, but their family and who's in their circle. So we could go in a million ways there of what you try to avoid. the hardest thing is getting the character right. That's the hardest thing. And there's a lot of times we'll pass on guys in the draft, and I know people freak out. Why? Well, there's usually something we found out or didn't like that, we ended up passing. It wasn't a good fit for us. It might be a good fit for somebody else, and they might make it work, but for us, it wasn't.
Chris, you talked about not giving Gus enough back in January. You really haven't done anything outside the building on defense. Any reason behind that?
Well, a lot of it is what's available, okay? And circumstances were available. I think getting Dallas Flowers back will help. All right, so I think probably when looking back on it, when I made that statement, the injury part of it played into it, and then we gave him a bunch of rookies. Well, now they're no longer rookies anymore. I mean, Jalen Jones is no longer a rookie. Juju is no longer a rookie. Dallas Flowers, we're hoping to get back healthy. We got back Kenny, back in the mix, which I think everybody in the in the grand scheme of things would tell you he's one of the top nickels in the league. It's not like these guys don't have enough talent. Do we want to add some more? Of course, we always want to add competition. But I think what we did is we gave them a bunch of young players, with not a lot of vet presence back there, other than Kenny and probably Julian.
Are you worried you're too young?
No, not anymore. I think they've grown up, and I think it's been fun to watch them. I mean, look, once you play 16, 17 games in this league, you've grown up to the fact where you're no longer a rookie. So I think we'll see better play out of them. And I didn't think it's kind of like the ass whipping y'all gave the O-line 2 years ago, and y'all just, O-line sucks, can't play. I kept going, man, the second half of the season, I didn't think it was that bad. I mean, there were some individual moments, of course, but I thought they got better as they played. I thought they got better as they played. And I think they'll continue to get better.
Hey Chris, timing is everything, and the timing of this offseason had you spending a lot of your money on keeping guys back, right? Just because of that timing, was it always destined that this draft was going to be maybe more important than others in terms of getting help right now, because you can't go out and hire new help right now?
Well, I think anytime you draft, look, the majority of your best players on your team, you hope they come from the draft. Okay, when you're building through free agency, I think y'all know my philosophy on this. And I think you've looked at the league. When you build through, you can't get all your best players through free agency. Too expensive, and it doesn't last over time. I think the draft's always important to get. I think in today's football, these guys got to come in and play. I mean, they do. They got to come in and play. And I think a lot of that. I think a lot of them are more ready to play probably than they were in the past for whatever reason. Like the one thing I'm blown away with talking to some of these really young guys is their football intelligence and knowledge of the game. Like, man, you talk to a kid from, I'm just grabbing a school, but Georgia on defense. I mean, Kirby and that group, they know defensive football. They know it as well as anybody. I mean, they have been schooled at a very high level that translates to this level. So I think to answer your question, Greg, I think every draft's important to get guys you got to get 2 or 3 guys. You'd like all of them to hit and help you right away. I know that's not real, but you need to get those guys to be able to play and make an impact.
How much of your thinking along the same lines? You're not drafting for just today. These guys, you need them to produce primarily 3-4 years from now to backfill your team. So how much of the philosophy is about today versus tomorrow? And I know coaches got to coach today, so their philosophy will be different, but you got to think long term.
It's always that. I think that's the general coaching, scouting,
Sure.
tug and pull that you get, where you'll have, we're looking at, okay, 2 years from now, this guy's up, we'll draft this guy to replace him, and then, and then on the coaching end, like, hey, screw that, man. We need I need today. No, it's definitely a balance. It's a balance.
Do you feel like you re-sign, a lot of your re-signs now match up timeline-wise, like 2026, right in that area? Was that specific, anything to do with Anthony's contract, or was that
A little bit, and a little bit just how it kind of worked out. And these guys they're all kind of in their primes. And so it's a little different when you're signing a 24-year-old, like when we signed Kenny the last time. I think Kenny was 22, 23. really young. All right, so we did a little longer deal. The shorter deal is more, their age. They're right in their prime. I think it's kind of, and I think you're seeing it across the league. It's a little bit of a league trend. You're not seeing quite as long of deals as you did in the past. You're not seeing those 6-year contracts much we used to.
Where do you see the prime kind of typically ending for a player age-wise?
Oh, that's a little luck. I always tell guys, you play 4 years in the league, that's a hell of a career. Social media and that brainiac of a world will criticize a guy for that, but like this is the elite of the elite, and it is hard to have a long career. It is. It's just hard. It's a hard game. It's hard on your body, and when you need a little luck, you got to have some freak physical traits. There's some guys that are just freak physical. Like I'll never forget in Chicago when we signed Julius Peppers, and everybody criticized us at 30, and at 38, he still looked good. And I think Buck's got a little of that in him. Like where Buck's, you stood next to him. God gifted him a little bit different. So Buck's probably going to be able to play as long as physically he wants to play. So I think it's a different case of what they have physically in their body to get a little luck with the injuries. I think every case is a little bit different.
Chris, a year ago at this time, you weren't positive yet who your quarterback would be. Now, obviously, that you understand that player. Does that change anything about the type of players you get around him on offense, or maybe the urgency to get in certain positions?
I don't know if it's urgency to get certain positions as much. It is a good feeling knowing that we like him, we like what we saw and where we're going with him. Like I said, one, protect. Block and protect. It's one of the most, like you just look through the league, you just look through the playoff teams, they all can block and protect. So I think that's critical. I think that's one. I remember Andrew used to tell me all the time, Chris, just make sure let's get me protected. I'll get the ball. Give me guys that'll catch it and get to the right spot, and I'll make the rest work. Most of the really good ones, that's how they kind of roll. Of course they want, do you want the superstar out there? Absolutely. But protection to me is always first and foremost.
You freed up a bunch of cap space with Buck's extension. How do you see the cap? Why did you structure it that way?
Just to make Twitter go nuts.
Mission accomplished.
Think you're kidding? I'm not. Just want to see the reaction.
And
Nothing beyond Twitter? Nothing beyond Twitter?
That's my answer. Yeah.
Did you want flexibility?
Yeah, it gives us flexibility. Yes.
You have to put this on the record.
Yes, it gives
We
us
have to put up the
flexibility.
Twitter fire.
No, I know. It just gives us flexibility. Yes.
Chris,
You go. Good.
Chris, having a year with Shane now, kind of seeing that proof of concept of what he wants out of his players, how does that impact the draft evaluation process with him?
Oh, it's really good, because it makes it. When you go in there and you start looking at players together, and then when he starts looking at the board, and okay, this is how I use this guy, this is how he fits, and from a GM perspective, that's a beautiful thing now, knowing that he's got a vision quickly for the player, and it's not a vision of negativity with many guys, where he sees the strengths really quickly and will figure out a role for how this guy can play for you, and that's fun. That makes it fun.
How many, if you want to share first round grades you have?
Oh God, I just left the freaking room too.
I can go check.
Why don't y'all come on in? I'll let y'all look at it. I want to say we had 19 to 21, right in that area.
You mentioned White out back at the combine. Anything else stand out to you depth-wise after you?
It's pretty good. Yeah, I think there's a few positions that's got some real depth. Like the O-line in this draft is really it's excellent. There's depth throughout. I truly believe you're going to get a really good player in those mid rounds and even some later because of the depth of the group. And wideout's very similar. It is an excellent. Those two position groups stand out. They're both really good.
Was there anything that stuck out to you about your board this year, whether it's bigger than normal because of the
players that are on longer agreements.
I'll say this, I do think you're gonna see a lot of offensive players taken early, in the first round. And I'm not saying it's a weak defensive draft, but it is a really strong offensive draft, especially at the top of it.
And Chris, has your draft philosophy or your evaluation philosophy changed or evolved in the last 7-8 years?
Yeah, I like to think I'm growing. I mean, yeah, in a lot of ways. I mean, like, longer you do this, I mean, even scouting or longer you do it, you hope you can grow and figure out, who are the ones that, I mean, you're always looking for unique talent, unique traits in a player. But then also on the flip side of that, making sure the character's always been very important with us, without question. But making sure that we're drafting not only the unique traits, but also some substance with it, with the tape. Now we've always been pretty consistent with that, but I mean, there's times you'll take a chance, and then I know where you're getting at, because we're going to trade back, and I can already see the article.
I mean, well, to that point, you have always stressed the value of picks and have looked for ways to get more picks. Is your roster in a different place? Where I don't know how many roster spots there are on this.
That's a good point. History. I mean, I just go off history, and the more picks you have, the better chance you have to hit. Now, of course, you're not going to hit on all of them, but it gives you more of a chance to hit. Look, we've moved up. We moved up for Jonathan Taylor. Like, when we see one that's in striking distance that we think we can go get, we'll do it. But it's got to work out. Like always, and then you got to have two that want to make. You got to have somebody that wants to make the trade.
It's always most expensive.
A couple more.
It's always most expensive to do that in the first round. Obviously, could you see yourself actually considering moving up in the first?
Well, I just said probably bad. I don't know. I think it would depend. There would have to get somebody within striking distance that we felt really was unique and a difference maker for us. Yeah.
Chris, is Drew Ogletree back with you guys?
Yes, he is. He's back.
Off the exempt list?
Correct.
We haven't talked yet about Charlie Partridge. He's got a long history of developing some big name guys. What can you tell us about him?
Excited about Charlie. Been watching it. He was at Wisconsin years ago. It's where I didn't get to know him well, but I know Coach Alvarez spoke just glowingly about him as a teacher and as a coach. And actually a few years ago, we actually reached out to him, and he's a very principle-centered man. Like, he wasn't leaving Pittsburgh. He had given their commitment, which in today's world is very unique, and I admire. But you just look at his history of developing players and his ability to make them better. I mean, and I'm not talking about like average ones either. I'm talking about unique, from J.J. Watt to kids that Hendrickson that's playing in Cincinnati. I mean, this guy's coached some really good players, and they all tell you he's one of the best ones they've had. So we're excited to get him. And he's been great to work with and fun to work with, and got a great eye for it. So it'll be fun to get him. I know it's the first week with the guys with him, and coaching's coaching in my mind. Like high school, college. I mean, there's good coaches at every level. Like it doesn't matter where level you're at. You can do it at any level. There's high school coaches, I promise you, that will come into our league and be perfectly damn good football coaches, man.
Okay, last one here. One quick follow-up on Ogletree, without getting into detail. I mean, are you comfortable with what you learned there?
Yes.
And you can move forward?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely comfortable with it.
That's Chris Ballard. So let's see if somebody's within striking distance that the Colts absolutely love, and they got a partner who's going to make that trade work. Let's see exactly where that shelf is in the first round. Let's see where that positional depth, and he talks about it at offensive line. I would not be surprised, based upon what he said, that they won't take one in the first round. I think pretty obviously. I think you want to make Twitter explode. Take an offensive lineman in the first round if you're the Indianapolis Colts when you've got all the starters returning. But taking one in the 3rd round, the 4th round, I think that they've figured some things out over the last couple of years, taking guys like Bernie Ryman in the 3rd round, taking Blake Freeland last year. They're developing Blake Freeland. I would not be surprised to see another football player like that taken 3rd round, 4th round. In fact, it would shock me if it didn't happen. I think they're going to take a backup running back. They're going to figure that out. And I think that they're going to take a cornerback. And they know, he said this, that the offensive portion of the draft, you know what? It's really strong at the top. Meaning that in the middle of that 1st round, maybe you wind up getting one of the best 3 defensive players in the draft at that level. We're going to see. But good stuff from Chris Ballard.